Hello students, welcome back to Believers As Academy. In today's topic of the day discussion, we will be understanding how India is utilizing its one of the strategic locations, especially Andaman and Nicobar Islands, mostly for a transforming leap that it wants to pull out in terms of the digital connectivity that it wants to build, right, globally to transform India into a global internet data hub, pretty much like Singapore, right? So in this today's particular video, let's understand what this global internet data hub is, and also we will try and understand why India has chosen Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and also let's try and understand the strategic significance and the advantages of this particular move to India, right? So let's begin. So recently this was announced by the Union Minister Ashwini Vaishnaw when one of the very recent program, the Google's Bharat AI Shakti event, which was pretty much before the India AI Summit, which took place. The Union Minister Ashwini Vaishnaw recently announced this plan to announce or to make Andaman and Nicobar Islands the global internet data transfer hub. So now, what is the goal of this particular move? It is to strengthen India's role in the global digital connectivity, especially in the Indo-Pacific region, right? Indo-Pacific region, especially concerning the data routes, right? So understand Andaman Nicobar Islands, not anything related to water here or not anything related to the maritime security, but mostly it is for the data protect, or let's say data transfer, okay, to make advancements in creating a hub which is so sophisticated and so well versed in terms of data transfer, pretty much like Singapore, right? Many examples, Amsterdam, correct, Frankfurt, right? Pretty much like that is what is India trying to build Andaman Nicobar Islands as that. So even before we try and understand why the world needs this new hub, right? Let's also try and understand what this hub is actually about. What are we trying to discuss, or what is the advantage of this hub, or what are we actually talking about this particular hub? So the global data transfer hub, right? The global data transfer hub, if you want to understand in simple terms, it is pretty much like a junction, right? Pretty much like a traffic junction. A traffic junction where vehicles meet from all the areas, all the corners, right? So pretty much like a traffic junction, the global data transfer or the data transfer hub is a junction where all the networks or the global networks meet, correct? So this is the place where it hosts various activities, like probably they act as data centers where huge amount of data of various networks are stored and transferred, and also it acts as a junction where various connections or various networks around the globe meets, correct? So this is very important considering that the data of all the global networks are meeting at a one particular point, and that particular point is in India, obviously means a lot for the India's infrastructure development, right? Because this can aid India in lot many ways. First and foremost thing is we can have more investments in terms of FDI or even in terms of FPI, correct? And it can even create more employment opportunities in the country, correct? And also most importantly, it can help India prove a stance in becoming a leading nation in advancing technologies related to the global or let's say the data transfer, correct? Because right now if we see, this particular generation is mostly revolving around AI, 5G, correct, and also mostly about streaming. And how good would that be if all of these things, right, which are pretty much possible because of a particular data center, and that data center is in India. So obviously it is a very strategic movement, and most let's say a landmark movement for the India's infrastructure development, correct? Because we will be holding our strongholds in all these areas, right? Because this is where it makes the data streaming more easier, right? And even because of the data center, even the connectivity of in fact not just India but world connectivity also increases, correct? So this is what is the advantage of the global data transfer hub, or what global data transfer hub is in general. So now let's understand why do we need this. So first is the existing hub which we spoke about, which is presently in the Singapore, is pretty much overburdened, right? Because of the land, energy, and the environmental limits that the certain nations have in terms of the development or the or let's say the establishment of these data hubs, right? Because what we discussed about the global data hub, one thing we just did not talk about, that these data centers are those areas where optic fibers both from land and even waters, correct? The optic fibers which carry or which enables the data transfer, right? So this is the area, or this is the hub where the optic fibers both from the land and also from the water, they meet, right? This is where the junction holds, correct? So now imagine Singapore, and it is so overburdened that so many optic fibers both from land and marine is pretty much concentrated in Singapore right now. So hence that is one of the reason why we need another data nodule, or let's say another data transfer node, to make things even more easier for the world's telecommunication, or even for the world's communication or the data transfer feasibility, right? And also the land is another problem because of the Singapore, right? Since we are talking about Singapore being overburdened, obviously the land energy pretty much is overexploited, and then the rising global data demand because of the present AI advancements, and also the 5G connectivity, and in fact the digital let's say inclusivity, which has gone even to the minutest, or the let's say even the remotest corners of the world, right? We can see people even from the remote African countries, tribals, making videos, TikTok videos, Instagram reels, correct? So because of this rising global data demand, obviously we need a very strong data transfer hub, correct? So the need for an alternative node for the digital redundancy and security is utmost importance. So hence we thought, or hence the country India thought, like we shall build a particular data hub which holds such importance, such strategic importance, both for the country and also in terms of helping the other countries or other nations to make sure that the digital transfer is being made very easier, right? So now we'll understand why Andaman Nicobar Islands, right? So Andaman Nicobar Islands, if we have to talk about the history of Andaman Nicobar Islands, so in fact it was the very first British possession which was given out, or let's say which declared independence even before the actual India got independence, I think way back in 1942. So earlier it was being captured, and it was being run by Japanese, or let's say the Japan, and in the year 1942 British again overtook it, and I think this was Andaman Nicobar Islands were the first to be in fact given freedom, or let's say to be declared independent even before the actual India was declared independent. And in fact, if we see the very few initial years after the independence, the island, because of its the geographical location, which is very far off from mainland, was pretty much neglected for the first 10-15 years. And little did the politicians or the governments knew the strategic advantage of Andaman Nicobar. And in fact, after 15 years, in fact, very recently, it was, in fact, the government, especially after the India government, started utilizing the geographical opportunity of this particular island location because of the Malacca Strait, which we have here. Correct? So this is the global choke point of various important trade routes. More than 18,000, in fact 75 to 80,000 ships they transfer, or let's say they transport, they use this route mostly for trade, and anything that has to come from China and probably has to reach Dubai or India should eventually take this Malacca Strait and reach the western side of the globe, right? So hence this is the most important strait, the Malacca Strait, and Andaman Nicobar Islands position very close to Malacca Strait proves very strategic for the country. And in fact, recently the government of India also has planned to make a very small port here, right? A very small subsidiary port, which can pretty much reduce the dependence of the China over various other important ports, especially let's say in Malaysia, or let's say even in Burma region. So now this port in India, in fact even this is also pretty much in news. So this port will help the India, or let's say even it would help the other countries, like for example Myanmar, Bangladesh, and even some of the important major ports here in India as well, which are pretty much situated in West Bengal or even in Andhra Pradesh, to kind of utilize the small ports to get the items shipped from China. Now let's say earlier the items which used to come from China, which supposed to have gone to, let's say, Dubai, had to come all the way to various small minute ports in every part of India, and then it had to kind of take a very huge detour from their actual turn. So now because India is planning to make this subsidiary port here in Andaman Nicobar, the ship that comes here does not have to go individually to all of these areas, so it will just stop here, deload all the shipments, and from here the Indian exporter or the importers, they'll take the goods from the small minor ships. So basically this is one of the instances how the country is now trying to utilize this Andaman Nicobar in a very strategic manner, and likewise we are even extending towards the data transfer hub as well, right? So I had to explain all of that to just tell you how the history, a small brief history about what the Andaman Nicobar Island and the significance of it, right? So let's quickly see why Andaman Nicobar in terms of the data transfer hub. One is the strategic location, because it is at the crossroads of major maritime and the communication routes. Second is it connects Southeast Asia, South Asia, and even Australia as well. And what is the major importance? It has the potential to release the pressure which is already there on Singapore, and it also enhances security, resilience of global data flows, and also it can act as India-led digital corridor in the Indo-Pacific region, right? So I think this is pretty much sufficient to understand. So now let's talk about the strategic and the economic benefits. This also pretty much discussed, so we'll just read it out. Strategic leverage, one is it strengthens India's digital sovereignty, especially in the Indo-Pacific region. And second is the economic growth, because it attracts more foreign investments, especially in the marine infrastructure and even the improvements of the data services. Third is it creates employment opportunity for the country. And also last one is the regional integration, because it connects the Northeast India to global digital networks also. So this is also one of the very important dimension, right? Moving forward. However, all of this included, there are challenges as well. So one is, what is the important challenge? The power supply constraints, right? Because we need to focus on developing or improving the infrastructure, mostly making sure that we're using the renewable energy sources, especially in terms of building these data centers, right? Else, once again, the problem of pollution, correct? And also it would curb the country to achieve its SDG goals, probably also to achieve its net zero emissions by 2070, correct? So hence the power supply constraints as a broader view. Then is the environmental concerns, correct? Protecting the fragile marine ecosystem, because we are talking about building or let's say taking the fiber optics even from the underwater, right? So talking about the marine ecosystem, it would greatly harm them. And even environmental concerns, I think I can even add all the indigenous people or the forest people, especially the tribals. Most at least like 5 indigenous tribes, they reside in Andaman Nicobar, including the northern Sentinelists, right? There are 5 different indigenous tribes, and they mostly reside in the forest, correct? So now even getting clearances to be able to utilize those forests in order to build data centers is also problematic. And also another important reason is it even affects the environment also, correct? So that is one important point. Then the high investment needs, right? It requires international partnership because it is a huge investment that it invites, and it's a very cost demanding project. So it needs both international partnerships and also private sector participation as well. And last but not the least, the regulatory framework, because we're talking about building a data center, correct? And that too in India. So we need certain very important regulatory framework, especially in data zoning, cable landing permissions, talking of the clearances and everything, in order to run those optic fibers, and even the global bandwidth leasing rules as well, right? So these are all the few challenges which probably I think the country is also pretty much prepared to go for this because of the return on investment that this project holds, correct? So now, ultimately, what is important? In order to achieve this, it is important that the government of India should also make sure that it develop green data centers powered by solar or wind, because this is one of the huge challenge that we discussed, because creation of a data center this big requires huge amount of time and development, and in fact the manufacturing is also involved. And if that manufacturing is pretty much done, most, let's say not even economically, let's say economically is also fine, economic terms also, in making sure by utilizing green sources, right, especially the solar and wind, it can even help India reduces emissions, achieve its targets, and also probably leave very less global, let's say, carbon footprint, correct? Next is build a clear digital infrastructure policy for Andaman, that is also there. And then last but not the least, foster public-private collaboration with the global tech giants, pretty much like Google, right? Or let's say your Meta, correct? So all these global tech giants can work together in a collaboration to make sure that this project, this power project, can become a huge success, right? So that is all for this particular video. Even before we end the video, let's solve one prelims question. Recently, the government of India proposed developing the Andaman Nicobar Islands as a global internet data transfer hub. Which of the following statements best explains the significance of such an initiative? It will make India one of the major landing points for international submarine cables. It aims to reduce global dependence on existing hubs such as Singapore. It will strengthen India's Act East policy by linking the northeastern states through digital connectivity. It will reduce India's oil import dependence by developing renewable energy projects in the islands. Select the correct answer using the codes below. So that is all for this particular video. I hope you have liked the video. Stay tuned for more such informative videos. Signing off, this is Madan Gopal. Have a beautiful day.